Nobody told me. Nobody actually sat me down in my 20s, in my 30s, and said to me, Webley, listen, you are going to work yourself into the ground for the next 30 years of your life. And the worst part about it is that you're going to call it ambition. And that story, that lie, it is going to be the thing that costs you the most. Nobody came and told me that in my 20s. So I told myself a story instead. And that story was a really good story. It was a very motivating story. It was clean. It was a very polished story. And it was also very impressive. When you tell other people that story, it was a story about drive. It was a story about grit, especially immigrant grit, about being the kind of woman who just does not stop because I'm a go-getter. And for a very long time, that story worked for me. It worked very well. It opened a lot of doors. It got me through a lot. It paid the bills. It made people respect me. And it was working pretty well until I hit 50 years old. And then I found myself sitting in a moment of actual quiet for the first time in, I can't even remember how long. And suddenly, the story that I was telling myself, it stopped working. And it's like the truth opened the door and walked in with no drama, no music, just quiet realization that that story I was telling myself, it wasn't ambition, it was survival. And there's a big difference between ambition and survival. So, because let's be real about what survival actually looks like, okay? We tend to dress it up so much that I feel that we've got to a point where we don't even recognize it anymore. We put a blazer on it, we put makeup on it. But survival is really being the first one in and the last one out. And it's not because you love the office, but because leaving in a way feels dangerous, because you are afraid that if you aren't there anymore, you will be forgotten and you will be replaced. Survival is saying yes before they even ask you. Not because you're excited about the project, but because you feel that if you say no, you are risking something that you cannot afford to lose. Survival, it's never letting them see you struggle, never letting a single crack show. And I always talk about how I came in this country alone, and I learned very quickly that struggling in public, it was something that was very expensive, because when you have no safety net, being vulnerable, it's not a trend, it's actually a liability. It costs you. So to avoid that, you hustle. You hustle a lot. You show up to the 7 a.m. call with a smile and a solution. And my culture loves that. They'll put your hustle on a t-shirt. They'll give you a TED talk for your hustle. But let's call it what it actually is. That hustle, it's actually a trauma response. And I'm going to say that again because I need you to hear it, because I know you can relate. Hustle at its very core is often just the body not feeling safe enough to stop. And I didn't feel safe to stop for 30 years, not 30 days, not 30 weeks, 30 years. That's a very long time. Think about that. 3 decades of constantly being on. And survival is something that you have to disguise. So you put it in a costume, because you cannot walk in a boardroom and say, I am working this hard because I'm terrified of what happens if I fail. You cannot say that. So you call it, I have standards. You call it passion. I'm a very passionate person. You call it ambition. I'm a very ambitious woman. Ambition is a costume that fits survival beautifully because, hey, let's say it, it gets you promoted, it gets you invited to the right dinners, it makes people look at you and say, oh my God, that girl, she's really going places. And then what do? You smile back. You smile back because you can't tell them the truth. You can't tell them that the reason that you're going places, it's because standing still, it feels like a death sentence to you. And I want you to really sit with my story for a second. It wasn't my plan to stay in this country. I was here on vacation and I decided to stay. I had no plan B, no safety net, no immediate relatives to catch me. So every time I failed, I absorbed that alone. Every time the money was tight, I managed it alone. And every time the future, it looked dark, there was only one person standing between me and the floor. It was me. How did I choose to deal with that? I over delivered. And it was not to prove that I was better than anyone else, but it was more to protect the life that I was working so hard to build. So ambition is a choice. When you look at it, ambition is a choice, but survival is a necessity. And one of those things gives you life, but the other one drains you to the marrow of your bones. And then it demands that you show up and then you keep doing that same thing again and again tomorrow. Guess which one I was running on? Survival, of course. And the change did not happen with some big dramatic explosion or some big dramatic life event. It didn't have the movie moment breakdown. It was actually more scarier than that because it was just sitting there doing nothing. And I realized that my body didn't know how to do that. I was like analyzing the room. I was looking for the next fire to put out. I was waiting for the next person to need me. I was waiting for the next person to need me to save them. And when I realized that there was no emergency, I didn't feel happy. Instead, I felt panic. My nervous system was so used to that type of chaos. It was so addicted to the survival rhythm that rest was something that felt like a threat to me. That is the moment that I knew that ambition is something that requires rest. Ambition takes vacations and it comes back excited and energized. What I was doing, it was not ambition at all. It was a 30-year flight or fight response. And at 50 years old, I finally had enough ground under my feet to stop. But I realized I had completely forgotten how to stay still. Now, I want you to listen to this. Don't let this turn into, I'm not letting this turn into a shame spiral because I don't want you to look back at your life and think that you wasted your time. Not at all, because you were not foolish. You were doing exactly what you had to do at the time. Because if you think about it, a different perspective, survival got you here. It built your career, it paid your rent, it kept your head above water, even when the waves were 10 feet high. So survival was actually the tool that you needed for the conditions that you were in at the time. You were in a war zone and you survived it. That is something to be proud of. But the question now at 50 years old is very different. The question isn't, how do I keep surviving? Because I don't want to keep surviving anymore. The question is, what do I do now that the war is over? What does it look like to build something because I actually want it? Not because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't have it. What does it look like to move at your own speed instead of moving at the speed of everyone else's panic? And this is something I am still trying to figure out. And I am genuinely learning what it feels like to have a body that isn't bracing for impact all the time. But the first step is actually calling it by its real name. And it wasn't ambition, it was survival. And now I'm learning the difference. And if you're watching this right now and you just let out a deep breath, that breath is information, and it means that your body has been waiting for you to admit this to yourself too, because you knew. You knew. I knew. You knew that the pace that you were going at, it was killing you. You knew that it wasn't about passion. You just did not have the words for it yet. Well, now you do. Now you do, and you are allowed to lay it all down now. Not the work, not the excellence that you've accumulated. You've earned that. You should be proud of that. But only lay down the fear underneath it all, because you have survived enough. We're done surviving. It is finally time to actually live. So I'm Webley, and I am learning to breathe again. And with that, I'll see you tomorrow.